The first thing you hear isn't a voice but a sound. A piercing, bass-wide lockdown siren that rips through the air. In that chaotic moment, my gaze was fixed on just one person, my uncle, Raj, a man who always believed his charisma was a skeleton key for any lock, was staring at a pair of military-grade restraints as if they were a foreign language. His face, usually a mask of smug confidence, was contorted in pure, unadulterated disbelief. He looked from the cuffs to me, his mouth opening and closing, but the sirens drowned out whatever he was trying to say. Then she spoke. Colonel Rostova, my commanding officer and a woman who communicated in quiet authority, fixed her steel-gray eyes on me. Her voice didn't need to be loud. It simply cut through the noise. "Major Sharma," she stated, her tone a flat line of protocol. "Confirm the subject's identity." I looked at my uncle, this larger-than-life figure from my childhood who now seemed so small and insignificant against the backdrop of federal procedure. A lifetime of dismissive jokes and condescending pats on the head flashed through my mind. I kept my own voice steady, a perfect mirror of my commander's. "Affirmative, Colonel. The subject is Raj Sharma." I took a breath. "And he is a level 1 security threat to this installation. Just 1 week earlier, I was a muted box in the corner of a chaotic family video call. Uncle Raj was holding court, as he always did. His voice boomed through my laptop speakers, boasting about some new import-export deal that was supposedly going to make him a legend. I just sipped my coffee and waited for it to be over. Finally, his attention swiveled to me. "And how's my little paper pusher?" he bellowed, the old nickname landing with its familiar dull thud. "Still making coffee for the real soldiers, kiddo." He then announced he'd be driving past my base next week and would pop in with a care package. I tried to intervene, to explain the reality of my world. "Uncle, it's a secure facility," I started. "There are protocols, strict visitor background checks." He cut me off with a wave of his hand and a hearty laugh that made everyone else on the call chuckle nervously. "Don't you worry about getting me on base, I've charmed my way through tougher doors than that," he said with a wink. "It's just a gate, sweetie, not an international border. Relax." A cold, quiet fury settled in my stomach. He wasn't just ignoring my words, he was dismissing my entire life's work as a trivial game. He hung up the call, convinced he was doing me a favor. He had no idea he'd just declared his intention to breach the security of one of the most sensitive intelligence hubs on the planet. To understand the federal charges that followed, you have to understand the 2 lives he forced me to keep separate. To my family, my life was a neat, simple, and slightly disappointing story. It was a story they had written for me, and one they preferred to the truth. The climax of that story always seemed to play out at a dinner table, under the warm, oppressive lights of a family gathering. I remember one dinner in particular, just before everything changed. My uncle, Raj, the family's designated son around which everyone else orbited, was holding court at the head of the table. He had this way of talking that made everything he said sound like a history, making proclamation, even if he was just talking about the stock market. On this night, he was in rare form. The main event was his gift to my younger brother, Samir, a quiet kid, with big dreams who was still trying to find his footing in the world. Raj made a grand spectacle of it, standing up and pulling a crisp envelope from his jacket pocket. He presented it to Samir with a flourish, announcing to the entire table that it was a check to fund his next great venture. The amount wasn't the point. The performance was. He lectured my brother about legacy, about being a man of action, while my parents beamed with pride. My father clapped Raj on the back. My mother's eyes welled up with tears. They were watching the family legacy play out, exactly as they'd always imagined it. Samir, bless him, just looked overwhelmed. After the applause died down, my mother, Carol, a woman who believed family harmony was worth any price, turned her hopeful gaze to me. "Anya, dear," she said, "tell everyone your news." She meant well. She was trying to include me, to give me a small sliver of the spotlight. So I took a breath and shared. I told them I had recently been awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Medal for my work on a classified project. I kept my voice even, my description brief. I couldn't tell them what it was for, couldn't explain the sleepless weeks, the crushing pressure, the impossible ethical calculations that led to that small piece of ribbon and metal. To me, it represented the heaviest burden I'd ever carried. There was a polite, slightly confused silence. Then Raj leaned back in his chair, a patronizing smile spreading across his face. "Oh, "That's adorable," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "They give out medals for perfect attendance now?" The question hung in the air, a deliberate and perfectly aimed insult. Before I could even process it, my mother jumped in with her usual excuse, the one I'd heard 1,000 times. "You know your uncle is proud, dear. His world is just bigger." And there it was. My world, a world of satellite intercepts, of geopolitical stabilization, of preventing conflicts, before they began, was somehow smaller than his world of shipping manifests and profit margins. In that moment, I didn't just hear his words, I remembered every other dismissal. The time he called my acceptance to the academy a cute adventure, the time he advised me to find a nice officer to marry when I made captain. It was a lifetime of being minimized, served up with dessert. But their world wasn't my reality. My reality was a place they couldn't even imagine, a place without windows, deep in the concrete heart of Fort Gideon. My real life took place in a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility. The only light in there was the cold blue-white glow of a dozen monitors, and the only sound was the constant low hum of servers processing trillions of bits of data per second. There was no loud talking, no ego, no performances. There was only the mission. In that room, I wasn't Anya, the paper pusher. I was Major Sharma. My call sign was Oracle. My job was to find the ghosts in the machine, to see the patterns in the noise that signaled a coming threat. I wasn't making coffee. I was the lead signals intelligence analyst for Operation Nightshade, a counter-espionage program so vital that its existence was a state secret. I remember standing in that silent, chilled room, briefing a group of stone-faced colonels and civilian directors from 3-letter agencies. These were people who didn't care about your family name or your charisma. They cared about one thing: the accuracy of your intelligence. My voice was steady as I pointed to a cascading stream of code on the main screen. "The asset's comms are compromised," I stated, my tone clinical. "We're seeing ghost traffic originating from a blacklisted server in Eastern Europe. The data packets are masked, but the telemetry is undeniable." I paused, meeting the gaze of my commander, Colonel Rostova. "I recommend we activate Protocol Chimera and assume the entire network is hostile." She didn't question me. She didn't second-guess my analysis or ask for a second opinion. She just listened, her expression unreadable, and gave a single decisive nod. Her complete unspoken trust was a validation more powerful than any check or round of applause could ever be. In my family's world, I was a footnote. In this room, my words could shift the global balance of power. This was my real home, the place where I wasn't invisible. It was the place where I was valued not for the story someone else wrote for me, but for the stark, undeniable truth of my competence. Later that night, after the disastrous family dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Samir. I braced myself for an apology on our uncle's behalf, or maybe a gentle suggestion to just let it go for the sake of the family. But that's not what it said. The message was short and to the point. A DMSM is a huge deal. I looked it up. "Uncle Raj is an idiot. Don't let him get to you." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. It was such a small thing, a quiet act of rebellion against the family narrative. But it felt like a lifeline. It was the first crack in the wall they had all built around me. It didn't erase the sting of a lifetime of being overlooked, but it was proof that someone, at least, was trying to see me. For a decade, I kept those two worlds firewalled. My family life was an exercise in enduring condescension. My professional life was an exercise in preventing global catastrophe. After that phone call, I realized one was about to destroy the other. I decided to use the rules of my world to protect it. After the video call ended, I sat in the silence of my small apartment, the echo of my uncle's dismissive laughter still ringing in my ears. For a moment, the old familiar hurt washed over me, the sting of being misunderstood, of being made small. But then, something else replaced it. A cold, quiet clarity. This was no longer a family squabble. My uncle's arrogance, his refusal to believe my world had rules he couldn't talk his way through, had just become a professional problem. He was a variable I couldn't control, a vulnerability I could not afford. Arguing with him was pointless. His ego was a fortress without doors. Trying to explain the gravity of his intentions would only be met with another condescending laugh. For years, I had tried to win their emotional arguments. I had tried to make them see me, to make them understand. But this wasn't an emotional problem. It was a security protocol issue, and it required a security protocol solution. The goal was no longer to be understood. The goal was neutralization. The next morning, I went to my office on base long before anyone else arrived. I sat down at my secure terminal, the one I used to track threats across continents, and logged into the Joint Personnel Adjudication System. It was the digital vault that held the entirety of my vetted life. I navigated to my own file, the massive document known as the SF-86. It's a biography written in security questions, a story of your life where every chapter is cross-referenced and verified. I scrolled past my own history, past old addresses, past missions, past every detail they had scrutinized to deem me trustworthy. I found the section I was looking for: foreign contacts and potential coercive influences. With methodical precision, my fingers moved across the keyboard. I created a new entry. Name: Raj Sharma. Relationship: uncle. In the justification field, I didn't write about my hurt feelings or his years of condescension. I wrote with the dispassionate clarity of an intelligence report. I cited his recent unvetted business trips to certain high-risk countries. And, most importantly, I documented his explicitly stated intent to bypass security protocols at a sensitive government facility. I was simply inputting data. The system would draw its own conclusions. The final step was a matter of professional courtesy. I opened my encrypted email and composed a brief message to Colonel Rostova's executive officer. It was short and to the point, sir. As per regulation, I have updated my security file to include a family member as a potential vector for undue influence. This is a procedural measure only. VR, Major Sharma. It wasn't a request for permission, it was a notification. It was me, demonstrating that I could and would manage any threat to my clearance, even if it came from inside my own family. I clicked submit. There was no anger, no satisfaction. It was just data entry. My uncle thought he could talk his way onto my base. He was about to find out that on Fort Gideon, your name talks for you, whether you like what it says or not. The day my uncle decided to visit was bright and clear. I watched from a monitor in my office as his car, a flashy silver convertible completely out of place among the drab-colored government sedans, pulled up to the main gate of Fort Gideon. The gate is an imposing structure of concrete barriers, steel plates, and watchtowers, a very clear line between the outside world and mine. He didn't seem to notice. He oozed a kind of unearned confidence, adjusting his designer sunglasses as he leaned over to speak to the young airman on duty. In his hand, he held a small white box from a bakery. A care package, a prop for the performance he was about to give. I couldn't hear his words, but I knew the script by heart. He'd be charming, familiar, a little condescending. He would call the armed guard son or champ. He would explain that he was just there to drop something off for his sweet little niece, Anya Sharma. He'd tell the guard that she had a boring little desk job inside, and that he, the important man of the world, was just taking a moment out of his busy schedule to say hello. He saw the guard not as a professional executing a vital security mission, but as a doorman. To be charmed, a minor obstacle to be overcome with a smile and a confident tone. He had no idea he was talking to a man who was trained to see through exactly that kind of performance. The Air Force security officer was young, but his posture was all business. He listened patiently, his expression neutral, and took my uncle's driver's license. Back in my office, I watched my own monitor, which was linked to the gate's security system. The airmen scanned the ID. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, the system I had armed the day before did its job. The entry field next to my uncle's name flashed from a calm digital green to a stark, urgent crimson. Across the screen, a banner appeared in bold, block letters, flagged individual, threat level 1. Initiate protocol Delta. Notify base command. It was all so quiet, so sterile, so procedural. The guard didn't flinch. He simply handed the ID back, said something I couldn't hear, and calmly spoke. Into the radio on his shoulder, his eyes never leaving my uncle's car. Raj, meanwhile, was still smiling his movie star smile, completely oblivious. He probably thought the guard was just calling to get clearance. He probably thought he had won. He was still living in his world, a world run on charisma and bluffing. He had no idea that he had just tripped a digital wire, and that a different world, my world, was now responding with silent, overwhelming force. He didn't have to wait long to find out. The response didn't come with sirens. It came with a terrifying silence. Within 90 seconds, 2 military police patrol vehicles glided into view from a side road, their movements practiced and precise. They didn't speed, they simply moved to box his car in, one in front, one behind, cutting off any possibility of escape. Then, a black command vehicle pulled up, and my heart hammered against my ribs. The door opened, and Colonel Rostova emerged, her uniform immaculate, her presence radiating pure, undiluted authority. And then, the other door opened, and I stepped out beside her. I saw the exact moment my uncle's reality shattered. His smug smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. His face cycled through a Rolodex of emotions, confusion, annoyance, and then, finally, a flicker of genuine fear. "Anya," he yelled, his voice cracking, "what is all this? Tell them who I am." He was appealing to me, to his niece, to the person he thought I was. He was trying to use the old family dynamic as a shield, but that shield was gone. Colonel Rostova didn't even look at him. She addressed the MP sergeant who had just approached us. "Sergeant, what's the flag?" she asked, her voice calm and cold. The sergeant glanced at his datapad, his own voice a professional monotone. "Ma'am, the subject is Raj Sharma. He's flagged on an active security directive filed by Major Sharma." He paused, then added the final nail. "He's also on a federal watch list for suspected involvement in illegal technology transfers." My uncle looked like he'd been struck. "Major?" he sputtered, his eyes wide as he stared at me. "What is this nonsense? I'm your uncle." He was making a last, desperate appeal to a set of rules that no longer applied. I finally met his gaze. There was no anger in me, no satisfaction. Only the cold weight of a necessary act. My voice, when I spoke, was as steady and as hard as the concrete barriers around us. "My rank is Major," I said clearly, "and my job is to protect this installation from threats. You told me you would bypass security. I let that hang in the air for a beat. You are the threat." As the military police moved forward with restraints, a sound finally broke. The tension, the piercing, escalating wail of the base-wide lockdown siren. The sound was an announcement. A casual visit had become a full-blown security incident. The invisible line he had crossed was now a screaming, unmissable alarm. My uncle spent my entire life telling me my job was unimportant. In the end, it was so important that the simple act of him saying my name at a gate was enough to get him arrested. As the sirens finally wound down, their mournful echo was the only thing left of the chaos. My uncle was gone, whisked away in an unmarked sedan by federal agents who had materialized with the quiet efficiency of ghosts. In his place, a strange calm settled over the main gate. My colleagues, the men and women I'd worked with in the silent, windowless rooms of Fort Gideon, were there. They didn't crowd me or offer empty platitudes, they just stood nearby, forming a quiet, supportive perimeter. I looked at their faces, and for the first time I saw more than just professional respect. I saw awe. I saw that they finally understood the second, invisible war one had been fighting. Colonel Rostova stepped closer, the sharp click of her heels on the pavement grounding me in the moment. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a rare and significant gesture from a woman who communicated through action, not affection. "His business partners have been on the FBI's radar for months, Major," she said, her voice low and steady. "They were untouchable. Your update to your file, your procedural diligence. It just handed them the probable cause they needed on a silver platter." She looked me in the eye, and I understood. "You didn't just stop a breach today. You may have just dismantled an entire espionage ring." Her words landed with a profound weight. My quiet, personal act of self-preservation had triggered something immense. The firewall I had built to protect my two worlds had not just held, it had incinerated the threat that tried to cross it. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, but the mission remained. My life, however, was fundamentally different. I was no longer Major Sharma, the analyst. I was Lieutenant Colonel Sharma, and my name was on the door. I was given command of the entire Operation Nightshade Task Force, the very program I had once served from the shadows. My new office had a large window that overlooked the sprawling, orderly world of the base. It was my domain now, a world I was responsible for, a world I had protected with a difficult choice. The authority I once had to hide from my family was now the core of my identity, absolute and earned through competence, not charisma. My new team, my real family, celebrated my promotion not with a loud, ostentatious party, but with a quiet gesture that meant so much more. They presented me with a framed unit patch, the symbol of our shared mission and mutual trust. It was a symbol of belonging, something I had craved my entire life but never found at a family dinner table. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was my brother, Samir. I hesitated, bracing for a fresh wave of family guilt and recriminations. But his voice was different, clear and steady. "Anya. I know Mom and Dad are a mess about Uncle Raj," he said, and I could hear the difficulty in his words. "They don't get it. But I do. You did what you had to do." He took a breath. "I've never been more proud of you." A single, genuine acknowledgement from the one person who had bothered to look up what my life really meant. That was the only validation I ever truly needed. The final ghost of my old life appeared a few weeks later, in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the letterhead of a high-priced law firm. It was from my uncle's legal team. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting his federal indictment as a tragic family misunderstanding. It was a desperate, cloying plea for me to provide a statement on his behalf, to help mitigate his sentence, to be the good niece one last time. A few years ago, a letter like that would have torn me apart. But as I read the words, I felt nothing. It was like reading a case file about a stranger. The emotional leverage was gone. The power he once held over me had been rendered inert. I didn't shred the letter. I didn't burn it. I simply scanned it, attached it to a new encrypted email, and sent it to the base's Judge Advocate General's office. My accompanying note was brief and clinical. "For your situational awareness. No further action required from my end." I hit send, moved the message to a digital archive, and turned back to the glowing map of global threats on my main screen. His case was closed. Mine was just beginning. My uncle believed power came from being the loudest person in the room. I learned that true power is the authority to decide who is and who is not allowed in that room in the first place. If you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your world, share your story in the comments. Here, protocol is always respected.